Howdy folks, once again this is Donnie, and I just want to do a follow-up on the video I made a few days ago concerning the drama that's coming out of Red Hat. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video, and if you don't know what's going on, this concerns the fact that the Red Hat company has decided to take the source code of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and put it behind a paywall so that only paying customers will be able to download the source code. Now, this has caused quite a lot of consternation and wailing and gnashing of teeth amongst the Linux faithful, and as you can imagine, right? And the accusations, of course, are that Red Hat is violating the free software ethos and might even be violating the GNU public license under which Red Hat is licensed. Now, I will get more of that. Howdy folks, once again this is Donnie, and I just want to do a follow-up on the video that I made a few days ago concerning the drama that's coming out of Red Hat. And if you haven't seen that video, if you don't know what I'm talking about, this concerns the fact that the Red Hat company has decided to remove public access to its source code for the Red Hat Enterprise Linux and put it behind a paywall so that only paying customers of Red Hat will be able to access it. And on top of that, something I didn't know a couple of days ago when I made the video, is that they also have a clause in their customer contract so that if a customer does access this source code and download it, and if they share it out in any way or redistribute it in any way, then Red Hat will just cancel their contract and will no longer allow the customers to use Red Hat products. Now, this has caused quite a bit of controversy and quite a bit of anger in the Linux community for a lot of different reasons, and I'll get to that more in just a few moments. But first off, to really understand this anger, all right, you got to understand, something about Red Hat's past and current business practices. You also need to understand the concept of free software. Now, when I say free software, I mean free as in freedom, not necessarily as in cost, because it is certainly legal and ethical and proper to charge money for this free as in freedom software. So when I'm talking about free software, I'm talking about software that adheres to the 4 software freedoms as expounded by Richard Stallman back in the 1980s. So you got the freedom to use the software any way you want it, and the freedom to examine the source code, the freedom to modify the source code to make the software do what you want it to do, and the freedom to redistribute the source code. Now, part of the anger, well, much of the anger has to do with the fact that Red Hat is not adhering to those principles right now. And yeah, I guess it's okay. I guess it's legal if they want to put the software behind a firewall or put the source code behind a firewall so only customers can get it. I don't think there's any real legal requirement for them to make it available to the whole general public. However, because Linux is licensed under what we call the GNU public license, which was written to guarantee people would have these 4 software freedoms if they use the free software that falls under that license, that does require that somebody who creates the software will provide the source code to the customers who access that software, who use that software. And once the customers have this source code, according to the GPL, they have the right to modify it or redistribute it or build new products from it. as they see fit, okay? But the Red Hat company, by putting this extra little clause in their customer contract saying, oh, if you do exercise your rights under this GNU public license, we'll just cut you off. We'll no longer allow you to use our software. Now, is that actually a violation of the GPL? Is it actually legal? Okay, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on television, but my gut feeling is that, yeah, they probably are violating the GNU public license under which their distribution is released. And by the way, they have to release their Red Hat Enterprise Linux under the GNU public license because they are using the Linux kernel, which is also licensed under this GNU public license. And from here on out, I'm just going to call it the GPL, okay? Anyway, so part of the GPL, a clause in the GPL says that you cannot use GPL licensed code in any type of proprietary product. If you include GPL license code in your product, then the whole product that you have created also has to fall under the GPL. Now, another part of the anger that's surrounding this decision is the fact that a lot of people feel that Red Hat is being really hypocritical here because Red Hat is, on the one hand, they are complaining. I mean, Mike McGrath, who is an executive at Red Hat, made a blog post which really made things worse, really just added to the anger because he was ranting about how people just want to use these free of charge clones of Red Hat Enterprise Linux to avoid paying Red Hat for the good work that their engineers and technicians have done in building the Red Hat Enterprise product. Okay? And yeah, I fully get that they want to get paid for that. But I mean, he continues on that, yeah, we got to get paid for this because if we don't get paid for this, then there's no way that we can continue bringing you these good Red Hat products. Now, on the other hand, okay, what people are angry about, one of the things that people are angry about is the fact that the bulk of every Linux distribution ever made, including Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is code that was written by other people. And those people are not getting paid. I mean, they're not getting paid by Red Hat, okay? Now, and in fact, back in 2014, if you remember back in 2014, hey, we had a little problem called Heartbleed. And it was a problem with OpenSSL. OpenSSL, of course, is one of the critical components that powers the internet. If it weren't for OpenSSL, well, I mean, there are other products like it, but OpenSSL is the most widespread, most widely used encryption technology on the internet. So if you don't have encryption, you don't have online banking services, you don't have online e-commerce services, you don't have anything online that requires privacy and security. So the OpenSSL, they had this Heartbleed, which is very, very serious vulnerability, which caused a lot of problems, right? And when people started investigating it, they found out, oh, there's only like one guy working on this OpenSSL project full-time. And he was surviving on donations, and I don't know how he was surviving on donations if he was working on it full-time, but the donations were amounting to like $2,000 a year. Like, wait a minute. So the Linux Foundation stepped in, and they basically, cut a deal with a lot of major corporations to start funding this OpenSSL project, along with some other critical projects as well. And Red Hat was one of the projects, or one of the corporations rather, that they had to kick in. So yeah, Red Hat finally did pay for that, but it wasn't until the Linux Foundation shamed them into doing it. All right, but yeah, I mean, but still, the fact remains, you know, they're using all this source code. Now, Mike McGrath's response to all this was, oh, well, we don't just repackage all this stuff that other people wrote. We actually have our engineers going through it and improving it, and yeah, we contribute back to the upstream and all that, and they deserve to get paid for that. Well, yeah, but you know what? If the fact remains that the Red Hat company is not paying for this source code, okay? So the source code came from other sources, from other people to begin with, and the Red Hat company hasn't paid anything for it except for, you know, times when Linux Foundation shames them into doing it, okay? So, and in fact, you know, hey, let's look, go back to the entire base, what we know as Linux, okay? So, if we really want to get technical, Linux really only refers to the Linux kernel. I mean, everybody refers to the whole operating system as Linux, and it's not really accurate, okay? And I do it too, you know, I know. But if you really want to get technical about it, Linux only refers to the Linux kernel, and the whole operating system that was built around that kernel is known as GNU. Now, most of that GNU operating system was created by Richard Stallman. And, you know, he had what he called the herd kernel, and he was going to build the operating system around that. Never really worked out, never really got that herd kernel working properly. So Linus Torvalds came along with a Linux kernel. Richard Stallman says, hey, let's team up here. And you provide the kernel, I'll provide the operating system. So that's what we have now as what is more accurately known as GNU Linux. Okay? Now, has Red Hat paid Richard Stallman anything? Probably not. Okay? So, yeah. The fact still remains, I still maintain, I have to agree with all these people who say that, yeah, Red Hat is being just a little bit hypocritical here, and maybe even a little bit unethical as well for, if not really legally violating that GPL, at the very least they are going against the whole free as in freedom software ethos. Okay? Now, also in the last video, I did point out that it's not just the fact that people want to use the operating system for free. It's not just that people want to just set up their servers with a Red Hat type software and not pay Red Hat for it. Yeah, certainly a lot of that goes on, right? But I also pointed out in the previous video that there are things that you can do with the free of charge clones of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that you cannot do with actual Red Hat Enterprise Linux, even if you have a valid Red Hat license. And I pointed out the fact that you need to have some sort of a free clone like that in order to do proper software testing. So if you are doing some sort of a continuous integration, continuous development process where you're trying to automate everything, you need to automatically spin up virtual machines on a regular basis. You're not going to be able to do that with actual Red Hat Linux, because every time you spin up a virtual machine, guess what? You got to enter all your user credentials and everything in order to log into your account to get it to do anything, right? So that makes the whole automation process kind of unwieldy, kind of impractical, right? And it's also the fact, as I pointed out in the previous video, you cannot use actual Red Hat Linux if you need to set up your own learning lab or your own lab for developing training documentation or training courses, anything like that. Okay, but because again, you're limited. Even if you have that free developers account, you're limited to 16 installations of it, and when you're setting up a lab like this, or when you're writing training documentation, when you're writing books, you're always creating new virtual machines. All right, that's just the way it is. And yeah, there are a few ways around that. Maybe make an archive copy of a virtual machine once you make it, and maybe reuse that. You can maybe just create a snapshot of the virtual machine and roll back to a snapshot every time you do anything with it. Yeah, you can do that, but still, it makes it a whole lot more complex, makes it more unwieldy, I guess you could say, than just being able to spin up a virtual machine and not have to worry about all that, right? But one thing I like to do is I contrast that with Microsoft. Okay, now Microsoft, they're a proprietary software company, and granted, in the past, it was fairly easy to pirate their products. They've made it a lot harder now. I don't advocate piracy, but still, one thing you got to say about them, and I know about their shady business tactics and all that. I know Bill Gates is a shady guy. I get that, right? But the one thing they do right is that they recognize that people need a free or low-cost way to be able to set up training labs, software development labs, and training documentation labs writing books, what have you, right? And so they actually say, it's actual company policy that if you want to do any of that stuff, just download a free of charge trial copy of their products, of whatever product that you need to work with, and just use that. And they actually say, hey, there's no need to pay us for this. Just use our trial products for these purposes. And they do expire, but after a few months, but it's not a big deal, right? So and also, if you are writing books about Microsoft products or creating and selling training courses about Microsoft products, that's perfectly fine with Microsoft. They don't care. Now, Red Hat, on the other hand, as I've stated before, as I stated in the previous video, they just don't offer any good, reasonably cost way to get any type of training. All right, and so as I say, it's just unwieldy using actual Red Hat products. Even if you have a Red Hat license, it's unwieldy, and impractical to set up your training labs, and also labs for being able to write documentation or write books or write courses. All right. Now, on top of that, here's a little something that I bet you didn't know, and most people don't know. The only reason I know about it is because I used to be in the business of creating and distributing training courses, right? Because my original client that I started with back in 2006, he was the guy that I showed you in the previous video who runs the Spider Tools outfit. But, of course, he was in the business of creating and selling training courses and doing online training for Red Hat products. But he had to do it by way of CentOS, okay? And he could not put the words Red Hat in the title of his course. Why? Because Red Hat, on top of all they're doing to try to restrict your rights under the GPL, they're also very, very jealous of their trademarks. And the one thing he told me was that if you are a creator or seller of of IT training courses, you don't dare create and sell a training course that has the words Red Hat in the title. Because he said, if you do, Red Hat will send their legal teams out to you with cease and desist orders and will shut you down. Okay? Microsoft doesn't do that. Why does Red Hat? So the only way that you can provide training for actual Red Hat Enterprise Linux without the fear of getting shut down is to become a Red Hat training partner. If you're a Red Hat training partner, there's no way that you can provide Red Hat training at a reasonable cost. Now, where my client was providing training for maybe hundreds of dollars a course, if you're a Red Hat training partner, you're providing training for thousands of dollars a course, because every time you sell a course to somebody for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you have to pay a big chunk of money to the Red Hat company. Yeah, that's just the way it is, right? So that's why I maintained in the previous video that had it not been for the presence of the free of charge CentOS years ago, and of course there are a couple other free of charge ones as well. There's also Springdale Linux, which actually is older than CentOS, and Scientific Linux, a few others back in the day, right? But if it had not been for those free of charge Red Hat Enterprise clones, I maintain that there's no way that Red Hat would have become a billion-dollar company. Well, actually, multi-billion-dollar company now, when you figure that IBM paid multiple billions of dollars. I think it's like $4 billion or something like that for Red Hat. But anyway, I don't think they would have become that large of a company had it not been for these free of charge Red Hat Enterprise clones that allowed people to have a reasonably cost way of learning Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay? And so I think when they're cutting off the source code, access to the source code to these free of charge Linux distributions, I think it's kind of like cutting off their nose to spite the face, you know. I really think, or shooting themselves in the foot, whatever metaphor you want, I think it's just a bad idea. And then when a Red Hat executive comes out with this blog post just accusing people, I mean, he's actually saying, hey, look, if you're using one of these Red Hat Enterprise clones, you're just a freeloader, you just don't want to pay for our software, you don't want to pay for the good work that we're doing and all that. Excuse me, but you're a multi-billion-dollar company. People aren't going to have any sympathy for you. That's just the way it is. And not only are you a multi-billion-dollar company, but you're a multi-billion-dollar company that's been using the source code that other people created, that's also licensed under free software licenses, and you're not paying for any of it. And yeah, I don't care that you're paying your technicians to help improve that code and all that. There's still the fact you're using that code and not paying for it. Okay, so what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know, I mean, if they're not going to pay for that free software code, then that's licensed under these free software licenses, then they can't really complain about people who are exercising their rights under the GPL to reuse the Red Hat Enterprise source code. And yes, I totally get that they want to get paid for it. I totally get that they want to make money. But again, a multi-billion-dollar company, you know, complaining about this stuff, right? But so I don't know, but it's just very, very weird to me. All right, and I wouldn't feel so bad about it if they would do like Microsoft and provide some sort of a way for people to have access to being able to set up their own training labs at a free or reasonable cost, okay? Because, you know, not everybody who's learning Linux, you know, has the money to pay thousands of dollars for one of their training courses. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is, right? If I were starting over again, and if there were no free or low-cost way to learn about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I would never have bothered with it. I would have gone with probably Debian, you know, or something like that. And I think a lot of other people probably felt the same way, right? But yeah, that's really pretty much the gist of it. Oh yeah, one other thing, IBM, okay. Red Hat is now a wholly owned subsidiary of IBM. Yes, the venerable international business machine. Ooh. So IBM paid them like something like $4 billion to buy out Red Hat, right? And but that doesn't bode well for Red Hat, because you got to look at the history of some of IBM's acquisitions. So back in, what was it, late 80s, early 90s, IBM ended their partnership with Microsoft over the development of the OS/2 operating system. This was in the pre-Linux days, of course. And IBM just took on development of OS/2 all by itself. Now, OS/2 was a really great operating system. And, you know, I used to run it on a homebrew 486 machine, single core, of course, 66 megahertz. And I started out with a machine with only like, I think, 10 megabytes of memory, later upgraded it to 32 megabytes of memory once the prices of memory started to fall. So I maxed that motherboard out at 32 megabytes. Megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes worth of memory. And let me tell you, OS/2 would blow away anything from Microsoft, okay? Far superior to Windows 3.11. Far superior. I mean, far superior. And, I mean, you could multitask with OS/2 like it was nobody's business on that old 486 machine. And even though it was just a single core machine, I mean, you could put a process in the background, it would keep running, okay? Just as if you had a multi-core machine. Windows 3.1, you put a process in the background, it stops, doesn't run anymore. So that was completely impractical for me, right? So I needed something I could do true multitasking with, so I went with OS/2. And I look back, it was a great operating system, right? But here's the thing. It could have been an even greater operating system, but IBM completely botched the marketing. And part of the reason they botched the marketing was the same sort of stuff, the same sort of thinking that's now infecting Red Hat. And that's the fact that they tried to be greedy. They tried to make it, well, it was a proprietary operating system, of course, no sharing of the source code, anything like that. But their big fatal mistake with OS/2 was the fact that they tried to make it so that it would only run on computers that were actually manufactured by IBM. And if other manufacturers wanted to put it on their own computers, you know, IBM, no, they wouldn't help out with that. All right, they just wouldn't help out. So they wanted to keep it as a wholly IBM project as and make it so that it would run on nothing but IBM computers. Right now, I made it run on my old homebrew 486, but the reason I was able to do that was I was able to buy components that were OS/2 compatible. Okay, but anyway, thanks to them botching their marketing process with OS/2, you know, where's OS/2 now? Well, it still exists, but very, very niche market, and it's not marketed by IBM. It's actually marketed by a third-party company that is using it, doing that under license from IBM. Okay, but very, very niche market. It could have been a real contender. Yeah, it could have knocked Microsoft off the throne, right? But again, they botched marketing. And then look at Lotus. Lotus Development, the makers of the great Lotus Office Suite. And it was a great Office Suite. I used to use it. I liked it. And but IBM bought Lotus. Well, where's Lotus now? It's completely gone. All right. And there are probably a few other projects like that, other projects that I could name, but still, you get the point, right? And now they own Red Hat. Listen, I'm telling you, this does not bode well for Red Hat. Okay? I mean, yeah, just because Red Hat is a multi-billion-dollar company now doesn't mean that they always will be. I think if they were an independent company, they'd have a better chance. I think they probably shot themselves in the foot by allowing IBM to buy them out. They should have looked at the history of IBM's acquisitions before signing on to this deal. So if you're a Red Hat employee, if you're a Red Hat executive, if you're watching this video, take my advice. If you're listening to the IBM marketing people, quit. Just quit. And better yet, if you can find a way to divorce yourselves from IBM and get out of this deal, become an independent company again, I think it would be in your best interest, okay? Because a lot of these shenanigans, with shutting down CentOS and now shutting down access to the source code, I don't know, that just smacks of things that IBM might do, all right? So, I don't know. But anyway, and by the way, I do have to tell you, this is my second attempt at this video. I actually made one over the weekend, which I ended up not uploading it because I said, this sounds a little bit too harsh, it's a little bit too long here. So I'm making this one just a little bit more brief and with a little less harshness, toward Red Hat, okay? But because, I understand the point of view. I understand they want to make money, but whether they like it or not, whether the Red Hat management likes it or not, they are part of the free, as in freedom, software community. They have to work within that framework. And part of working within that framework is to find a way to make money, find a business model that makes them money without violating the GPL and without violating the free software ethos. And they obviously did find a way to do that because they sell services, they sell training through their training partners, and they do provide a lot of value that you actually can't get just by downloading the free version of a Red Hat Enterprise clone. And so yeah, they found that formula. They became a multi-billion-dollar company because of it, and now they're shooting themselves in the foot. I do believe. I still maintain that. So hopefully they'll get back on track. And it looks like the Alma Linux people and the Rocky Linux people have found a way around the restrictions, and they're continuing on just with a slight modification of their development process and the rebuild process. So hopefully they can keep on with that. Hopefully people will still be able to have access to these free of charge products, which will allow them to do the things that they can't do with the official Red Hat Linux. All right, so that's pretty much it for that video. And before I go, I do want to say, hey, check out my books. Okay, so we have Mastering Linux Security and Hardening, and the third edition, which came out at the end of February 2023. And if you're an IT administrator, if you're a Linux administrator who needs to learn how to harden your systems as much as possible in order to make them as secure as possible, hey, great book. And also, if you're a Linux administrator who needs to work with the modern Linux distros that use the systemd init system, and who doesn't these days, because all of the enterprise-grade operating systems use systemd, then you've likely been frustrated if you've ever tried to find information about systemd. Well, I can help you here, because what I have here is not a book about systemd, it is the book about systemd, because it's the only book on the market that does comprehensive coverage of the entire systemd ecosystem. So be sure to check it out. And purchase links for the video. Purchase links for the books. Purchase links for the books will be in the video description below. So that's all I got for today. So hopefully this did not come across as too harsh against Red Hat. Again, I understand their point of view, but I also understand they need to work within the parameters of the free software framework. Okay, so once again, this is Donnie. Over and out. I'll catch you next time.